Imagine waking up one morning and your mother is just gone. No note. No phone call. No goodbye. Just an empty house. A door propped open. And blood on the porch. That's exactly what happened to one of America's most beloved TV anchors. And nearly 3 months later, her 84-year-old mother is still missing. But here's the part that nobody can explain. There was a man on the doorbell camera. Armed. Masked. Standing right outside her front door. The FBI has called him a suspect. So why hasn't he been caught? Stay with me, because this case gets stranger the deeper you go. Before we get into what happened, you need to know who Nancy Guthrie is. Nancy Ellen Long was born on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky. She raised 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, largely on her own. Her husband Charles died in a mining accident in Mexico in 1988. Savannah was still a teenager when she lost her father. Nancy was the rock of that family. She always had been. At 84 years old, Nancy lived alone in the Catalina foothills, a quiet, upscale community just north of Tucson, Arizona. She'd lived in the Tucson area for over 50 years. She was sharp, independent, a woman of deep faith. Every Sunday morning, without fail, she tuned into her church's online service. She never missed it. And that small, weekly routine is exactly how her family knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. It was Saturday evening, January 31st, 2026. Nancy had spent the night at her daughter Annie's house, a completely normal family visit. Around 9:45 p.m., Annie's husband Tommaso Cioni drove Nancy back to her home in the Catalina foothills. He dropped her off at the door. She walked inside. Tommaso drove away. That was the last time anyone at all, saw Nancy Guthrie. The next morning, Sunday, February 1st, Nancy never joined her church livestream. Her friend called. No answer. The family called her phone. Nothing. By 11 a.m., relatives drove to her house. They searched every room. Walked the entire property. No Nancy. Just her phone. Her wallet. Her shoes. Her medication. All still inside. And then, on the porch outside, they found blood. At noon on February 1st, the family called 911. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived within minutes. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fear. The back doors of the house had been propped open from the inside. Her belongings were untouched: phone, keys, medicine, everything. The blood on the porch tested positive for Nancy's DNA. Sheriff Chris Nanos told the press what his investigators believed almost immediately. Nancy Guthrie had not walked away. She had been taken. Think about what that means for a moment. Someone came to the home of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night and took her in her pajamas, without her shoes, without her medicine. No struggle visible enough to alert neighbors. No witnesses. No screaming. No calls for help. Just silence. And a door left open behind them. Within hours, this became one of the largest missing persons investigations in Arizona's recent history. The FBI was called in immediately. U.S. Customs and Border Protection joined the effort. Search and rescue teams spread across the Catalina foothills neighborhood. Surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses was collected. The area was canvassed door to door. Law enforcement was treating this as a possible abduction from day one. And then, the news broke nationally. Because Nancy Guthrie isn't just any missing person. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. One of the most recognized faces in American morning television. Within hours of her mother's disappearance, Savannah stepped away from the anchor desk. She suspended her broadcasting duties, including coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, to be with her family. In a statement, she thanked law enforcement and urged anyone with information to come forward. The image of Savannah, usually so composed, so professional, now just a terrified daughter. It broke the country's heart. 10 days after Nancy disappeared, investigators released something that changed everything. Footage from Nancy's own doorbell camera. In the footage, a figure appears outside her front door on the morning of February 1st. The figure is masked. Armed. Standing right there. At her door. The FBI has since publicly described this individual as a suspect in her disappearance. There is video of a possible armed abductor at the home of a missing woman. And yet, weeks turned into months. And that person has not been caught. So here's the question everyone is asking. If there is video, clear doorbell footage, of a masked, armed man at the scene, why hasn't law enforcement identified him? Why no arrest? Why no public name? Investigators have stayed silent on the details. The footage has not been widely released to the public. And that silence, from the FBI, from the sheriff's office, has frustrated legal experts, former agents, and millions of Americans watching this case unfold. Something isn't adding up. And we're going to get to that. But the masked figure on the camera wasn't the only disturbing development. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, ransom notes began arriving. Multiple notes. Of undetermined origin. They demanded payment in cryptocurrency, designed to be untraceable. 2 separate deadlines were set by whoever sent them. Both deadlines came and went. No confirmed payment. No proof of life. The family and law enforcement were left in an agonizing silence. Was Nancy alive? Were the notes real? Was someone bluffing? Nobody knew. Then, TMZ reported something that made investigators stop cold. Shortly after one ransom note went public, a second message arrived. It read, "I saw her alive with them in the state of Sonora, Mexico." Sonora, Mexico, the state that shares a major border with Arizona. Nancy's home in Tucson is roughly 70 miles from the border. TMZ said they immediately alerted the FBI. Were the notes real? Were they from whoever took her? Or were they the cruel work of scammers exploiting a grieving family? To this day, authorities have neither confirmed nor denied their validity. Meanwhile, forensic teams were working around the clock. About 2 miles from Nancy's home, investigators found a pair of gloves. Preliminary testing pointed to DNA from an unknown male. They ran it through the national database. No match. Another dead end. Then came the hair sample. The FBI had requested a specific piece of evidence and sent it to a private lab in Florida. 11 weeks later, that lab finally transferred the sample to the FBI's own laboratory. 11 weeks on a piece of evidence in a kidnapping case. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer was not quiet about her frustration. She publicly questioned the handling of that evidence. The FBI would have always had the technology to test this, she said. That should really have the Guthrie family, and anyone who cares about justice, upset. Because that is not tracking at all. And she wasn't alone. Legal analysts. Former detectives. Even members of the public watching this case closely were asking the same thing. Why did it take so long? Who made that call? And what was in that evidence that took months to analyze? Here's a detail that flew under the radar for most people. The forensic lab connected to the Gilgo Beach serial killer case, one of the most sophisticated crime labs in the country, was reportedly brought in to assist with the Nancy Guthrie investigation. If you don't know the Gilgo Beach case, that's a long unsolved series of murders on Long Island that was finally cracked using cutting-edge DNA genealogy technology. Bringing in that same level of forensic firepower tells you something. Law enforcement is not treating this like a simple missing persons case. They are treating it like something much, much darker. On February 10th, 9 days after Nancy vanished, investigators got what looked like a break. A person of interest was pulled over during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona. That's about 60 miles south of Tucson, closer to the Mexican border. The FBI and the Sheriff's Department immediately executed a search warrant on a nearby property and vehicle. Roads were closed. Search teams moved in. Everyone held their breath. By February 11th, it was over. The individual was released. No charges. No connection to the case. The door slammed shut again. 3 days later, February 13th, a second operation launched. This time, at a residence just 2 miles from Nancy's home. 2 people were removed from the property. Roads in the surrounding area were closed for nearly 4 hours. Neighbors watched from behind the yellow tape. The media gathered. And again, nothing that led to an arrest. No charges. No suspects named. No answers. Every time hope flickered, it was extinguished. The investigation was starting to feel like a maze with no exit. On February 24th, the Guthrie family made a desperate public appeal. $1 million. That's the reward they offered for any information leading to Nancy's safe recovery. Savannah made a direct, emotional plea to the public. She asked people to look at Nancy's photo, to remember her face, to speak up if they knew anything. In late March, the family released another statement. No detail is too small. We need renewed attention. And the public responded. Yellow ribbons appeared outside the Today studio at Rockefeller Center. Fans gathered on the street holding signs that read, "We love you, Savannah." On April 6, 2026, after 2 agonizing months away, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show. It was one of the most emotional moments in daytime television in years. Before returning, she had told Hoda Kotb, "It's hard to imagine doing it because it's such a place of joy and lightness. But I can't come back, because it's my family. I think it's part of my purpose right now." Hoda responded simply, "I feel like I get to watch what strength looks like." The audience wept. The internet wept. And through it all, still no news about her mother. But even back at the desk, the weight of it was visible. During one episode, viewers noticed something strange. Savannah suddenly vanished mid-broadcast, moments before a scheduled interview. The show didn't explain it. No announcement. No update. Another anchor stepped into cover. Savannah returned later in the episode, composed, professional. But the internet erupted. Millions of viewers asked the same question. Did she get news about her mother? The show never addressed it. And the not knowing, for Savannah, and for all of us, continued. Now, here's where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. In late April 2026, newly revealed emails exposed something unsettling about the Pima County Sheriff's Department. In the months before Nancy's disappearance, the department had undergone major internal leadership changes. The heads of multiple key investigative units had been rotated out. Every single one of them. And on top of that, the department had signed a deal with a production company to film a reality TV show. The show was called Desert Law. 10 episodes. airing on A&E. It began broadcasting in January 2026, just 1 month before Nancy went missing. Critics and legal analysts began asking uncomfortable questions. Was the department distracted by filming? Were leadership changes at the worst possible time affecting the investigation? Sheriff Chris Nanos pushed back hard. When viral rumors swept social media claiming a new person of interest had been detained, Nanos faced reporters directly. A Fox News reporter asked him point-blank, had someone new been detained? Nanos looked at the camera and gave a single-word answer, nope. But the questions didn't stop. The frustration didn't stop. And Nancy was still missing. So after nearly 3 months, what do the experts actually think happened? Former FBI Assistant Director John Miller weighed in just days ago. His theory is chilling in its simplicity. He believes the person who took Nancy is local. Someone who knew the neighborhood. Someone familiar with Nancy's routine. Someone who knew she lived alone and was vulnerable. This was probably hatched locally, Miller said, by someone who thought, here's a woman who is defenseless, who lives alone, who is connected to a family with resources. He added, in the vast majority of kidnappings, the perpetrator had some prior connection to the victim. Miller went further. He said he believes the answer to this case has been in Tucson all along. A former employee. A contractor. Someone who had worked on the property. Someone who had been inside that house. Someone who knew Nancy well enough to know exactly when she'd be alone and vulnerable. The answer is right there, Miller said plainly. The answer is in Tucson. Law enforcement has quietly increased patrols around Savannah's home and her sister Annie's home. Amateur investigators and vloggers have flooded the Catalina Foothills neighborhood. The sheriff's office has had to issue public warnings telling them to stay back. As of today, April 29, 2026, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 88 days. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. DNA testing is still ongoing. Results could take weeks more, possibly months. A separate federal trial is scheduled for a man connected to the ransom text scheme, but that case is distinct from the actual abduction. The real investigation, the question of who took Nancy Guthrie and where she is, remains completely open. And Nancy's neighbors say the Catalina Foothills feels different now. Quieter. More watchful. Permanently changed. Cases like this one force us to sit with something deeply uncomfortable. We live in a world with doorbell cameras, DNA databases. FBI forensic labs have technology that can identify a person from a hair follicle. And yet, an 84-year-old woman can simply vanish. A masked man can appear on camera at her door and still not be identified 3 months later. Ransom notes can be sent to media outlets, and we still don't know if they're real. There is something uniquely terrifying about that. Not the dramatic horror of a movie. The quiet, suffocating horror of not knowing. Somewhere tonight, Savannah Guthrie is sitting with that same not knowing. She goes to work every morning. She reads the news. She smiles for the camera. And somewhere behind her eyes, a daughter is still searching. Nancy once told Savannah the best advice of her life after she lost her father as a teenager. 2 words. Decide and do. Right now, all this family can do is keep deciding, to search, to push, to refuse to let the world forget. And all we can do is make sure Nancy Guthrie's name stays in the conversation. Because someone out there knows where she is. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department. A $1 million reward is still on the table. And if this story moved you, please share this video. True crime content doesn't just entertain. Sometimes, it saves lives. Sometimes the right person sees the right video and picks up the phone. This case is not cold. Nancy Guthrie is still out there somewhere. And someone knows where. If you're new here, subscribe. New cases every week. Cases that matter. I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Stay safe.